Hi, hey Amy, hello everyone. Huh?
Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. It's the last Empathy Power Up for Pride Month. It's
Snaps.
happy sad because it was Pride, but also it's the end of the month. Every month should be Pride. But anyways, welcome everyone to Empathy Power Up. We've been on this amazing journey where we've talked a lot about change, and we talked and all through learning through Amy's story, and now we're moving into this action phase, the phase of what can we do. And this is part 3, and this brings this is the penultimate part to our 6-part sort of story that brings all of this together, and we'll finish it off next week. But today I'm here just to learn more and just continue on this journey as we are together. So Amy, would love to hear.
Awesome. Here I go. So like I said, I did this keynote. This is we're doing them over 6 parts in these sessions, like you just said, Kevin. But I think also I have blog posts that come out every week that will tell a deeper story and kind of summarize the stuff. So it's introducing the content here, but also look on our blog post on medium.com that comes out. So where we left off last week was this concept of like empathy rising, if you remember, Kevin. And it was like, we love this idea. And I was like, this is just like what has happened in our personal stories and how we're connected to this work. And this time around, I really wanted to talk about this other part of my book and my work when it comes to talking about action and taking action. So when I started conceptualizing this book, I started thinking about, let me learn from people who are answering the same questions that I'm having. So I kind of, helped provide, they provided a roadmap and wisdom for me that kind of led me to where I am today. So I'm so grateful for them, and I keep learning as I have more gatherings and working. And so I'm just going to share 3 short snippets of wisdom that came from people who are changing the world with empathy. So the first one I'd love to talk about is Antoinette Carroll. She's the founder, president, and CEO of Creative Reaction Lab. She's a pioneer of equity-centered community design. I probably talk about her a lot because she's one of my favorite people and just so full of passion for the work of trying to tackle systemic racism. She's a former board member of the AIGA board for designers. And when I talked to her, she said that a lack of empathy creates harm, trauma, and negative systemic impact. But what
Oh, looks like Amy's video is frozen, unless mine is. Amy was having internet troubles. So I'm gonna check on Amy to see how things are going. Let me text her. But just as we're going through this, the idea of empathy rising is something that is really important, and we're gonna do a quick check. So this is what happens, the fun stuff, when we go live and we have some of these technical challenges with internet and various aspects. So that's okay. It happens. This is life. This is where empathy and vulnerability are important. And I am just checking in with Amy on. We'll be right back. Hang on. Let's see. And da, 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 da. Hmm. Sorry about this, folks, but can't control the tech part as much. Just checking in. Let's see if I can bring Amy on the phone. We're gonna improvise. We're gonna see if I can get Amy's audio on the phone. Yeah, I think we're still live. I put you on the phone. I can put you on speakerphone and see if we can get you that way. Oh, are you back? Oh, you're back.
Woo! I am back. Sorry.
Technology happens.
I've been having computer problems, and they say it's not my apartment, it's the entire complex that's got some problems. So apologies. What was the last thing I left off with?
You were recapping, and then you started on the action part, and then we lost you.
Gosh. Okay. All right. Wow. Okay. So I did a whole soliloquy all by myself then. So when I talk about action, that this is where I kind of wanted to end our conversation. So this part is actually in two parts. I'm going to tell you about some of the people that have the wisdom that people have been giving me through the research of when I was starting with the book. And when I started conceiving of the book, I wanted to talk to people who I see are leading with empathy and trying to change the world in a good way. So I probably have talked quite a few times about Antoinette Carroll. She's the founder, president, and CEO of Creative Reaction Lab. She's a pioneer of this kind of framework called equity-centered community design. She also believes that when I talked to her, she said that she believes that a lack of empathy creates harm, trauma, and negative systemic impact. And this is something that she sees firsthand because she works directly with people who are experiencing systemic racism. And she's in St. Louis, Missouri, and she works with people all over the world and all over the country and does a lot of really deep equity work. And so she also says that if you look at it on the flip side, the abundance of empathy creates safety, confidence, power, and systemic impact. So if you just reframe it, it's can we actually start applying empathy? We can create so many great impacts that way.
And so, I love that point. We talk about the zeitgeist of systemic change, and the people who are in this empathy movement, we've realized that empathy is the way to drive that systemic change. And I love that you're sort of bringing in that perspective. So yeah, please continue. Just wanted to really amplify that point.
Yeah, I think it's about weaving the story together, and that's what I've been trying to do with these different storylines along the way. So so she says that the pathway to equity is through she focuses on equity-centered design is you have to have empathy and humility to get to equity. And so what she mentions, you may have seen before, there's a picture when they talk about equality versus equity. And equality is it's three people, one person's on a box, and then two people, there's two boxes for some people. Mm-hmm. And then equality is everybody gets the same box. And then equity is everybody gets different sizes of box based on what their needs are. So one of my favorite vision, showing of this way of equality versus equity is by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And Antoinette talks about equality is equal access, while equity is equal outcomes. And so on the top of this picture, I'm going to describe it to you. They have four people, one person in a wheelchair, another person who's very tall, an average sized person, and a child. But in equality, you give them the same bicycle, but the problem is 3 out of those 4 people, like, for example, the child can't even reach the pedals, right? Or the person who's in a wheelchair can't even get on the bike because they can't use the bike. So what equity does, and the picture shows, is if you change it's the same, you get from point A to point B, you get the same outcome, but the person who's handicapped, for example, might have to use a hand-driven, bike so that they can get to where they need to go. And the child gets a smaller bike. So that gives you an example of, like, that's what equity is for us. It's like we're trying to get to the same place, but we have different means to get there. So
yeah, I love that. I love the outcome part of it. It is so, and this is, I think, really important for businesses, for governments, for any organization doing any work. Outcome mindset. If you approach everything from an outcome mindset, you will be able to sort of easily separate out where that disconnect is, why things that are currently existing aren't working, because we're not looking at the equality of outcome. We're looking at, oh, let's just hire someone because we're missing so and so. What is the outcome we're trying to achieve? How are we trying to drive that? Love that.
Yeah. Exactly. So you can see that in many things. Is like often we just give everybody the same thing, and then we expect the same outcome. But if you give everybody the same thing, you're not going to get the same outcome. So you have to kind of, have a multi-driven approach there. So another person who inspires me and is a friend of mine through writing this book is Monica Kursa. She's the director of Plus Peace and the founder and director of Activate Labs. So what she does is peace building. And so I learned a whole lot about dignity and a lot about, like, how do you build peace between different groups of people that might be warring between each other. And she said that when I was talking to her about empathy, we had a lovely coffee conversation, and, several hours turned out to be. And she said that empathy has hands and feet. It means that you're moving yourself, your body, and your work to the spaces where the problems are occurring. And that is where you find out that the lack of outcomes that are happening, right? You have to be there. You have to be present where the problems are occurring. She works with populations such as refugees, historically underinvested communities, and then also people who are directly impacted by trauma, conflict, and uncertainty. So these people often don't have the resilience to respond to trauma. You keep having trauma happen to you, you don't have the resilience to keep going. And that's just really important part of the work that I do and a lot of other people do when we talk about design in particular.
Amy, what you mentioned of bringing empathy, the work to building peace is you've got to be in the problem, understand it, and that is empathy. That is the empathy work, and then you can build that spirit. An example is recently the states, I can't remember, it was West Virginia, which state passed a law saying about transgender access to banning people from trans people from participating in sports. And on the news, when they asked the governor, wait, did you have a single instance where someone was abusing the system and faking being transgender to go win at sport? Oh no, we don't have a single one. And so then now that they've created is it delivered trauma to the people. There's no empathy in this. It is based on fear. It's a coordinated effort. And the reason I bring that up is I think if that lawmakers were to go spend some time with people who are trans identifying or people and building that empathy, then you can understand where people are coming from. And that is so core to this action that you mentioned. It's inspirational. Love it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Monica also says that if something is working for you, you're not going to change it, right?
Yeah.
And so, but in a lot of ways, people continue to put these laws in place, right? Like talk about the voting laws, because they want to keep the status quo, right? So if something is working for someone, they're not going to change it. That's going to keep the status quo because they benefit from the way things are.
Yep.
And so a lot of these laws and things that are happening. And so the final thing that, I want to say, to tell the story of this third person, I know we're at time, but also I skipped out for a few minutes there, is this idea that we have to disrupt this cycle in a parallel universe, that is where it models what is not working anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's what she says right before that quote, when I was just talking about if you have to model these areas, right? So that's where the empathy comes in. But recently I held a Clubhouse conversation with a number of people to talk about designing with rather than for people. And we invited Stephen Chang from the National Equity Project.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a little bit of a longer quote, but I think it's a great summarization of what we're doing here and why empathy is so necessary. So he says, we have a history of discrimination within our country, which has been institutionalized into our systems. We know this because we wrote it down. Almost all of policies, significant institutions, and structures within our society explicitly names discrimination. That goes all the way back to our Constitution, where slaves were valued at 3/5 of a human being for the census. So how is it that we justify the one group or several groups within society that have much greater power, privilege, resources, and opportunities than other groups? We have this at the roots of our society. It shows up in the products we build, the culture we create, the world that has been created for us. We must recognize just how deeply ingrained and structured that is in our society and how it's held in place. This is what we need to interrupt. The way we can overcome that kind of cruelty is empathy. When we see our humanity in someone else, it's very hard for us to not care for that.
Yeah.
We often assume that people recognize that, but we need to be explicit that discrimination is a false narrative to reinforce it. It's about shifting power.
Oh, love that so much. That was a great way to summarize that. Love it.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
And that gets us set for next week when we talk about the elephant in the room, which is power. So
love it.
So you're there.
Power up, talking about power. Love it.
Power up, talking about power and shifting power. So giving power to everyone out there in the world. So yeah, so that's the end of this first part about action, and this just having these inspirational people just like come into my life because I intentionally set out to tell these stories. And like, I'm just so grateful that these people have opened their conversations and their hearts and minds to me. So you're going to get some more of that coming up. And check in with us. We're probably going to have some guest speakers come. We've got some other great stuff. We have 9 weeks of like content that I've got planned for you. Just awesome things going on. So excited to have you join us.
I hope you're as excited about empathy as we are.
Yeah.
We'll see you next week. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.